So Jack Della Maddalena will be fighting this weekend, and his opponent is going to be Bassil Hafez, who was taking him on about 5 or 6 days notice, which is crazy. So big respect to Bassil Hafez. But before we do get into the breakdown, I do want to talk about a couple of things. The first thing is, I am so happy Jack Della Maddalena stays on this card and makes the card so much better. And then the second thing is, respect to Bassil Hafez. And then the third thing is, so it's not two things, it's three things. There's a lot of people saying it should have been Buckley, it should have been this, it should have been that. Buckley had his chance to take the fight this weekend, and obviously he turned it down, because otherwise why would they sign somebody to fight JDM if Buckley wanted the fight? So Buckley didn't want the fight. Kevin Holland has a fight booked, and obviously nobody else in the promotion wanted to take JDM on short notice. So once again, a lot of respect to Bassil Hafez taking on Jack Della Maddalena, who is a very, very dangerous opponent on 5 days notice. And for Bassil Hafez, I did go out there and I watched his 4 most recent fights. I watched him beat the undefeated 8-0 Christian Savoy. I watched him lose a split decision, which I thought he should have won, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the breakdown. And then I saw him beat Anthony Ivy, a former UFC fighter, a split decision, which I thought he should have won as well. And then I watched him knock out Evan Cutts. Now, this is actually going to be a much more dangerous matchup for Jack Della Maddalena than the Josiah Harrell fight would have been, because Josiah Harrell was 5'7", he was small at lightweight, and he was going to come up to 170 pounds to fight Jack Della Maddalena. Now, Bassil Hafez is also a pretty big 170 pounder, so it's going to be interesting to see if he can make the weight. But speaking of making the weight, Jack Della Maddalena does have to do 2 weight cuts in 2 weeks, which is potentially a cause of concern. Now, Bassil Hafez only does have 1 KO on his record, and it is his most recent KO. But if you watch his fights, man, this guy does have power. He knocked down Anthony Ivy about 30 seconds into the first round, and then in the second round, he had Anthony Ivy on skates again. Now, most of these fights that he does have, he instantly goes for takedowns and then uses his black belt and BJJ to find a submission or just work on top. He did that when he won the bout against Christian Savoy. And if I was Bassil Hafez, that's exactly how I would actually fight Jack Della Maddalena in this matchup. About 10 seconds into the matchup, Christian Savoy throws a head kick, and Bassil Hafez instantly goes for a takedown on Savoy and is already working for submissions very, very early on. Against Evan Cutts, sort of a similar sort of game plan. I thought he should have won, but his cardio just did not hold out in that matchup. And speaking of cardio again, his cardio didn't hold out against Anthony Ivy either, and he really slowed down in the second and the third round. He definitely lost the third round because he was completely gassed out, but I thought he did win the first 2 rounds based on the work that he was doing in those rounds. He does do a rematch with Evan Cutts, knocks out Evan Cutts, and if you only watch this fight, you would think this guy was the striker, because I watched this fight first. I watched his most recent fight first to see what he was all about, and it was a purely striking matchup. And I was like, man, why is he a striker with 4 submission wins? So I went back and I watched all of his previous fights. For the most part, he is a grappler, and he is very good at grappling. He's got that black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He also does get a lot of good looks. I believe he trained out of Factory X Muay Thai against Anthony Ivy in that matchup. He's also trained with someone like Justin Gaethje. He's been training with Kamaru Usman, the Usman brothers actually recently as well. So he's been getting a lot of good training in recently, as Bassil Hafez. And now he's taking on JDM on short notice. Now, you don't really need me to tell you what Jack Della Maddalena is all about. For the most part, Jack Della Maddalena is a boxer with really good takedown defense. He's really, really nice with it as well, like with his boxing. And when he does get the fight to the ground, when he's on top, he can work submissions. He did it against Randy Brown when he got the rear naked choke after knocking him down, brutally knocked him down, quickly worked the rear naked choke. He showed pretty good submission defense against Ramazan Ameev when he had to defend, I believe it was an arm triangle choke. I could be wrong, but he had to defend a choke for a very long time in that matchup, and then eventually he got it to the feet and knocked him out. All of his wins in the UFC are first round knockouts. I think he probably can knock out Bassil Hafez in the very first round. Bassil Hafez, he's a decent striker, but he's pretty sloppy. Like, all of his shots for the most part are overhands or hooks. Now, he is very powerful. His KO over Evan Cutts is probably one of the better KOs that you will see recently, because he just put him out, man. He put him out with I think it was a counter right hook, and he was out cold, man. Evan Cutts was just out of it, like splayed out on the floor. But aside from that, against Anthony Ivy, knocks down Anthony Ivy with another right hand, overhand right, very early on into the fight, 30 seconds into the fight, and then he kind of goes and tries to out-wrestle Anthony Ivy. He ends up on bottom at times, but then he gets it back up to the feet. In the second round, he hurts Anthony Ivy again, puts him on skates, has him almost out on his feet, like he's kind of wobbling around. But for the most part, Bassil Hafez is a grappler, but he is powerful. There is concerns about Jack Della Maddalena cutting weight twice because this fight has been announced to be at 170 pounds again. It isn't going to be a catchweight bout. Bassil Hafez is a big guy. He's a powerful guy. I saw him go for a standing arm triangle choke when he lost to Evan Cuts very early on into that fight, which I did think he won, but he probably lost because he gassed out. Is probably what the judges were seeing. But in that fight, he's actually got a lot in his arsenal. Like, he went for so many submissions against Evan Cuts, it was crazy. And he also, in a very short fight, went for like 3 different kinds of submissions against Christian Savoy. His black belt in BJJ, and his BJJ really does show when he is fighting, because he's always transitioning for submissions when he does get the fight to the ground. However, against Evan Cuts, what I was surprised at, he was going for like a standing arm triangle choke. It was crazy. So maybe if he can pressure Jack Della Maddalena super early, he can go for something weird like that. But for the most part, I think JDM is going to be the significantly better striker in the matchup. I think JDM can defend the takedowns from Bassil Hafez as well. Unless Bassil Hafez goes out there and explodes immediately, like he has done in the past. He exploded immediately and got a takedown within the first like 10-15 seconds against Christian Savoy. Didn't really catch him off guard, but he just exploded into the takedown. He hurt Anthony Ivy before he took him down. He took down Evan Cuts very early and very often in that fight as well. So JDM's going to have to be wary of that. But when it comes to the striking, he's going to be the significantly better striker. So I am going to pick Jack Della Maddalena to win by knockout, and likely in the first round as well. However, there is still cause for concern about the double weight cut, but I just don't see this fight extending into the second and the third rounds. And if it does extend into the second or the third rounds, we know that Bassil Hafez's his cardio isn't that great. He slowed down a lot in the second and the third round against Anthony Ivy. The fight against Evan Cuts, he looked good, but the whole fight was on the feet for the most part, except for in the end, Evan Cuts was desperately trying to take him down. But you know, Jack Della Maddalena, I think he wins this fight. I think he wins this fight by knockout. Only one person has voted on it. I'm pretty sure not too many people know about this fight being announced already. It was just added to Tapology, but I am going to go with JDM to win by KO. But once again, respect to Bassil Hafez for taking this fight.